Okay, that's not how it's supposed to do. That. All right, how's it going, everybody? So it's Monday. Do you have a nice weekend? Good. I asked you to today prepare a journal entry based upon a persona. So how did that go for you all? Curious, like who you chose to be. So, um, yeah, just kind of who wants to share about their persona? I'd love to hear some people's who you were, who, like how they're doing right now, in like sort of the late 19th century in Japan. So raise your hand, or I can also just do some random calling. But yeah, I'd love to hear from some of you who you chose to be. Yeah, Tora. Yeah.
I did a journal entry from a factory worker, a woman,
Okay.
and basically just describing how her day was terrible and
And like, how did you choose to that as your persona? The
how did
factory.
I choose it?
Yeah, like why did you choose that? Yeah.
Well, I was reading about it in the chapter, and I read about how they worked for about 14 hours a day. And I just felt for that and wanted to like.
Okay. That's a very good persona to choose. We're going to actually talk about factory workers more next class, but this is one of the sort of the key kinds of people that are populating and making this new industrializing Japan work. And as we can see, it was not very glamorous. And we'll talk about also like why it goes from being glamorous to unglamorous pretty quickly. So I like that you chose that person. Thank you, Tora. Other folks, yeah, Peter.
I chose the silk farmer.
Oh, the farmer, okay.
Basically, I said how much production has prosperity has come his way, but he's still skeptical of this push for industrialization and kind of worries about the I guess collective attitude,
Okay.
kind of stability.
So a nice connection there with Tora, right? Who's reeling the silk, right? And you're growing the silk with the silkworms. So life is much better. Lots of financial growth, but some concern about where things are going for Japan. Okay, I like those. But one more person from over here. Yeah, Rashid.
I chose the 7th grade student.
Okay.
And one thing I read about was that one day there was a special event and they had the script and education during the convention of all the students in the school. And I also wrote about how they started learning English to prepare for higher level education in school.
Okay.
So because it was standardized through university and at the national, or was it law university, right? It was standardized that they start learning English in college, so they were preparing it from before in the schools.
And were you like pretty happy with how things were going? Were you stressed? How were you as a student?
I mean, as a 7th grader, I wrote that they wouldn't be that stressed because they're 7th graders, they're aware of changes happening around them, but not too concerned about it.
Yeah, they have more important things to worry about, like what clothes to wear, like what to, like who to hang out with, you know, boyfriends, girlfriends, these kind of things. Probably so. Okay, thank you for that. We're actually going to do more with that today, with that persona. So keep that for us for later on. So this was our first of a few journal entries, a chance to sort of just apply what you've learned in your readings and in class to envision life through the eyes of somebody who was living at this time period. And it sounds like you guys took that seriously, so that's very good. So we're going to take a step back now and talk a bit more about what's happening. The people of Japan are now in a new phase. And on Friday, you guys talked about the Constitution, right, with Heiun? Is that right? Constitution? So the Constitution, from what you can see, is it a pretty cool document? Is it a pretty empowering document for Japan's population? They have all these new rights, these new as citizens, right? Well, I want to go back to that a bit more and then go a bit further in talking about these rights. So to get to this Constitution, right, there are several steps. We'll try and see if I can avoid too much echo here. The Charter Oath promised that Japan was going to have some sort of assembly system, right? Trying to have a democracy for Japan in the future. But the reality is that a lot of the steps to that took a long time to manifest themselves. The first assemblies at the level of prefectures they take a decade to actually take shape. And then these are going to be very much based upon people who have land and a lot of land actually, and enough land to qualify them gives us a portion of Japan that can vote of about 1% of men. That's it. So a very small voting population for this new sort of democratic system. So sort of getting towards democracy, but not there at all. And we also see that the Meiji government is also worried about too much power for the populace of Japan, for Japan's masses. So they allow a little bit of voting, and then right afterwards, they make even stronger laws against assembly and press that criticizes the government. So these are things that are going to restrict how newspapers and reporters can talk about the government, about the emperor, and the imperial family, and it's going to be the beginning or the basis for more strict press censorship and for meetings and gatherings. Not extremely provocative here, but this will be a basis for future much more strict policies later on. But the same year that they announced this, they also announced that there's going to be an imperial diet. Imperial diet is going to be a pretty major new thing for Japan, to have an assembly where people will meet in either one or two chambers, and they will be voting on how the government is going to function, right? And this is a core piece of democracy. But it takes a long time. It takes 5 years before they create the first peerage system, which is going to be the people who will be in the upper house, or the House of Peers, of this imperial diet. And there's still not a diet yet. They're just, people have gotten this title. And the people who become peers, the first people who will be part of this upper house later on, they are from the court, people who have ties to the imperial court, or they are military officials. They are former daimyo who used to be, who then became governors of prefectures. They have the military and imperial elite of Japan who get these titles. So it's a pretty high level, and it's a pretty sort of British style peerage system that will populate this group that will eventually become the House of Peers. And you can't see here, but there also are barons and marquises and viscounts, the titles that you get that are, as peers, that make you part of this system. All right, let's talk a bit about how this structure functions as well. So when the government does promulgate this new constitution in 1889, this is the last step before creating an actual imperial diet and a true democracy, but they lay out the framework. And the framework looks like this. It's actually quite complicated, but I'll point out a few things. One is that there is going to be an imperial diet that people vote for, as we discussed before, based upon the small voting rights of the lower level, or the assemblies at the level of the prefecture. It's going to be a very small amount of people who vote, and of men, right, for the house of the lower house. But there will be some sort of democracy here that's happening, and that the imperial diet then passes on its power of legislation to the head of state, who is the emperor at the top. But the emperor has a lot of different powers that don't at all go through the imperial diet, and seem to be disconnected from the people who have chosen these legislators. The emperor is in charge of the armed forces. The emperor is also in charge of the courts. The emperor is also in charge to appoint people to the Council of State, or the ministers of state, or the cabinet. So the power of the emperor is a little bit ambiguous. It's a democracy, but it has some ambiguity to it. And we'll go more into that in a second. The people who established this system, it was drafted by two individuals, both of whom have a lot of experience working and living in Western Europe. The first is Inoue Kowashi, who we see here. He was Minister of Justice, and he was very much influenced by Belgian government practices, and also by German. At this point, it was Prussian government practices. So he's drawing on the Prussian constitution very heavily, and to a lesser extent, Belgian constitution systems to craft his idea how the government should function in Japan. The other is also very much a Prussian constitutional sort of advocate, and that is Japan's first Prime Minister, Ito Hirobumi, but this is before he has that title. He is going to be the person who really finalizes the draft of the Constitution and sets the system up that we just saw a second ago. And as you can see, there are lots of buffers against too much mass political activity. Constitution is promulgated in 1889 in February in a big ceremony like this, in which the government of Meiji Japan presents this to the emperor, and the emperor then promulgates it to the people of Japan. So it's a gift. He gives them the gift of this liberating constitution in a very elaborate ceremony here. So as you, I think, probably discussed a little bit on Friday, there are lots of new rights. People in Japan become true national Japanese citizens with rights and also responsibilities. They have to pay taxes. They have to abide by the draft. They have to follow the rule of law. But they get freedoms like due process, property rights. They get freedom of religion within certain limits of peace and order and duties as subjects. Freedom of speech and association. Also, there are some brackets around that one as well. But these are new things. People in Japan had not, up until the 1880s, talked about this idea of being politically represented, right? Or of having rights, so to speak. The idea of rights as a whole, as Hyun is working on this right now, is a new concept. They had their lives, they had things, they had obligations, right? But the idea that the nation of Japan owed them something, and that they in return owed this nation something as well, is a very modern and heavily Western influenced concept. With these rights and these obligations and duties to the nation, there comes also a very heavy emphasis on the emperor. And this, I think you guys discussed this a little bit on Friday as well, but the emperor occupies the first chapter and the first articles of this new constitution. The emperor is from a line of emperors since ages eternal. The emperor is sacred and inviolable. That means sacred and he's infallible. The emperor is head of the empire. And what you also can read about are how these things tie into elements like the parliament, or in this case, the diet. So the emperor convokes the diet, but he can also dissolve the diet. He can close it as well when need be, as he sees fit. And the emperor also is sort of the authority over public safety, and that ordinances can also be passed down, and they they are more important than the law in many places as well, if need be. So he has this interesting sort of absolute authority sometimes, and then he has a constitutional monarchy authority in other times, and there's always this sort of this tension that's there. So that's happening in the world of politics, this move towards constitutional democracy and trying to figure out how this is going to function, concern for too much popular freedom. The masses who are uneducated are going to make bad choices, or that's what these oligarchs think. Behind this, there's another campaign happening, and it has to do with the idea, with the ideas of national identity and belief in the country of Japan, but also in Japan's fate. And it also kind of relates back to our talk before about Japaneseness with Motoori Norinaga and the national studies movement. And these ideas have been around now for over a century, but they've become more influential here in the 1880s, 1890s in this new government's, as it sort of takes more official shape as well. One of the key elements seems to be that Japan had been influenced so much by China and by Buddhism, and Buddhism had become so powerful during the shogunate, if you'll recall, that this new modern Japan needed to be Japanese, needed to not rely upon Chinese learning, Chinese ways of communication, and of course also not on Chinese religion. And it needed to rely instead on Japanese religion, which they were calling more and more now Shinto. But people in Japan didn't have this concept. They were not thinking of Shinto as its own religion. They would go to a temple, and they would, which is Buddhist, and they would pray to the gods, some of whom actually were kami who had been renamed as Buddhist deities. So this was a very difficult, as we mentioned a few classes ago, it required a lot of work. So I want to go into today to talk about how this happens. How does Japan go from being a country that more or less practiced a mixture of Buddhist and Shinto beliefs and practices into being one that, whose government at least, was heavily influenced by and favoring Shinto. A good place to sort of look at this process is with the intersection of the arrival of Western missionaries, the resurgence of Japanese Christians, and the state's response to these issues. So I mentioned before that there was not a Christian threat anymore in Japan, which was true. But partially this was the case because the few Christians who were able to survive, either in exile or who survived torture or who survived by faking their lack of belief, they escaped to practice in secrecy, and they became hidden or kakore Christians. So they left towards islands that are near Nagasaki called the Goto Islands in particular, which is way over here. And they basically stayed there, worried about the fate if they were to go back to Japan proper and be Christians. And they maintained their beliefs in secrecy on the island. There were about 50 or 60,000 Japanese Christians at that point living on these islands, practicing Christianity, but they would disguise, their Christian icons with to look like Buddhist icons. Here we can see, for example, Mary with Jesus, but who was made to look very much more like the Maitreya Buddha, for example. But they still tried to maintain their Christianity, and there were no more foreign priests to help administer sacraments, to teach them, to help them with their faith, so to speak. So it became really a Japanese version that also evolved very much in its own direction in these territories. In 1864, having received word, over the past decade that Japan had become open again to not just the West, but also to Westerners, they were ready when the first missionaries began to appear from Western Europe and the United States. So the coming out of these hidden Christians occurs at the unveiling of the new cathedral built by the French Foreign Missionary Society priest Bernard Petitjean. The image is gone, but he, was shocked to see coming out of the woodworks these Japanese Christians who didn't speak very well any European languages, but who knew all these Catholic words and who clearly believed still in Christianity. So they thought they were going to be fine. They thought, okay, things this group of about 50 people were sure that they were going to be fine. But in fact, and he welcomed them into the church. But the government of Japan was still enforcing the anti-Christian edicts, and these people were persecuted. Many were sent into exile or imprisoned. It was only with the intervention of Europeans that they were able to partially be allowed to go back to their islands. So there was not an openness to Christianity or to other religions at this point, and so Christianity was no good, and obviously we see increasing anti-Buddhist sentiment as well. And when the Meiji government takes over, one of their first measures is to reissue the anti-Christian edicts. So missionaries can come to Japan and they can preach Christianity, but they cannot. But it's still illegal to be a Christian in Japan in '68. So we can see things are a little bit complicated. And we also discussed before, several times, the separation of Buddhism and Shinto that was happening. It really takes off in the 1868-69 period as well, in the aftermath of the Boshin War. So we're trying to suppress Buddhism. We see that happening. We're still trying to limit or weaken Christianity, even though it's probably going to have to be tolerated because missionaries, along with merchants from the West, are coming to Japan. But we also have the rise of this other thing, this thing that's going to be called more and more Shinto. And I want to go back to a part of what's happening. This is the elevation of Ise Shrine. Ise Shrine is Japan's most sacred shrine today. It is the shrine to the sun goddess, Amaterasu, who is the patron kami of the imperial family today and has been since that family became the imperial family. This is the ties between the imperial family and the shrine go back many hundreds of years, probably back even to the 600s and 700s. Imperial house members would become priests or priestesses of Ise Shrine, but this was a local shrine. So for most of Japan's history, people from various places in Japan would never have known what Ise Shrine was. They would not go there to visit, they would not take trips to go visit it. It was a local shrine. If you lived in the prefecture, which at that time, if you lived in the domain around Ise, which would today is Mie Prefecture, then you would know about this shrine. But otherwise, it was not a national site. So it becomes a very different kind of site, though, as people from this same domain, like Motoi Norinaga, begin to sort of talk up the importance of the imperial family and of its ties to Shinto. So let's talk about making Shinto. So the new Meiji government that takes shape, first they reissue the bans against Christianity, just to make sure that we're all on the same page about that. They write and talk about the importance of unifying rite or ritual and rule. So rule is governance, but the rite or ritual part is religion. And these very adamant advocates of Japanese religion bring that right away back into the new government. And the second department that they create in the new government is the Department of Divinity. Within a few weeks, they create a national shrine hierarchy. Shinto is up to this point, it is a folk religion. People practice Shinto in different ways throughout Japan. There's no hierarchy like Buddhism. There's no canon of books that you read, texts that you study to know Shinto. It's not even called Shinto. The Way of the Gods was actually a way to talk about Buddhism and Shinto as opposed to Christianity when it was first created. It's like this term Shinto. So anyway, they create a hierarchy of shrines with national shrines, with shrines of national importance, and then of regional importance, and then of local importance. And then shrines become government institutions and are declared as such in 1871 by this new Department of Divinity. So you see how this is a really quick shift? All of a sudden now we have shrines taking this important spot as space and also institutions in Japan's government within 2 years of the creation of this new Meiji government. This was not all roses because shrines were independent, local affairs for the most part, but the government steps in here and makes the land also part of it nationalizes the land and makes it part of the government's property. And then they require people in Japan to stop going to Buddhist temples to register for births, marriages, and deaths, and tell them to go instead to go to local Shinto shrines. So they essentially just try and shift the emphasis from Buddhism to Shinto with these rules, which don't necessarily work very well, but the intention is there, and it creates a lot of important sort of pro-Shinto momentum. They also launch a campaign to get talismans throughout Japan of Ise Shrine, so that people across Japan will begin to recognize Ise Shrine as an important national shrine tied to the imperial family. So you see we're kind of moving here in a certain direction, and we'll see how this goes over time. Another important shrine that is important in this process of creating national identity of Japaneseness and also of linking this to religion is Yasukuni Shrine, which we see here probably around 1880. So this shrine is today Japan's most famous shrine, unfortunately, and we'll talk about it more in class later on. But it was created as by Omura Masajiro, who we see here. His statue is still there today in today's Tokyo. Omura was a top general from Choshu, a very close associate of the other founder of the Imperial Army, Yamagata Aritomo, and he founds this shrine to welcome the spirits of those who died fighting for Japan, and for the imperial family of Japan in particular. And it's a small shrine in 1869. It does not have it is not right away an important shrine. It's more of it's tied in fact to Japan's military from the beginning. But within a decade, the Meiji Emperor changes the name to Yasukuni Shrine, Yasukuni, which means peaceful country, ironically, and it becomes a national shrine, and then it becomes a special imperial shrine, the highest level of shrines in this new hierarchy. So it is the first national shrine for Japan's war dead, and therefore the most important, and we'll see its importance throughout the course in the weeks to come. Here we can see Yasukuni with its infamous iron torii at the entrance. And here we can also see how people today continue to utilize the shrine to celebrate Japan's imperial past and those who died to make Japan what it is and also what it was before. Back again to these Christians. So we have Europeans coming now because of the opening of Japan to European trade in larger and larger numbers, and destroying the economy of Japan, but also making their homes in Japan in these treaty ports where they're allowed to live and practice their religions and to live basically under European or American law. But this obviously is going to affect Japan beyond the gates and the moats that are separating these different places from Japan proper. So one of the important facts will be Christianity. We talked about how the Meiji government was going to work really hard to bring in experts from European and well, I should say Europe and Canada and the United States to advise them on military affairs, but also on things like education and law, all these kinds of things, right? So this process will also bring a lot of Europeans and Americans, and also from Canada as well, into beyond the small treaty ports into Japan proper, where they teach, but they also talk about their beliefs. And so we have very quickly a situation in which Christianity is illegal, but people are becoming Christians and talking about Christianity, where missionaries where those who are teaching sometimes, for example, will then also teach on the side of Christianity as well. And it's important to then address that. But they're being persecuted, fined, imprisoned, these kinds of things. And it is the pressure from US and British diplomats that then eventually pushes the Meiji government to take down this anti-Christian policy. So it's not legalized, but it's decriminalized in 1873. I think I just said all these things, but this does happen, opening the road for a very different future for Christianity in Japan. But at the same time, the government is really looking very seriously at how to make Shinto a national religion and how to make it the religion that is guiding Japan. The most important initiative in this effort takes place alongside the sort of shrine hierarchy creation and these kinds of things. They want to bolster Shinto so that it becomes more important than Buddhism, but also so that it can keep Christianity from becoming too important in Japan. the Department of Divinity, which is part of the Meiji government, launches a great teaching campaign. It lasts for 14 years, and it is a major endeavor. They created a central institute in Tokyo in the same year that they removed the anti-Christian signs, by the way. And they also create local prefectural and then even a smaller level local teaching institutes that are supposed to be helping with this process. The goal of these institutes is to train people in Japan to understand these basic principles. The first is to revere the kami and the other and love the nation. The second is to basically apply the principles of heaven and the way of man. The third is serve the emperor and to faithfully maintain the will of the court. So the emperor, pretty important in this, and revering the kami, very important as well. They use the word kami. They don't use other words that might mean deity. They use kami because this is a word that it's a very Shinto concept, and they put that with loving the nation or patriotism. So these are the three important, the three standards, and they are preached by people who have gone to train in this thinking at the Great Teaching Institute. But I make this point here that this actually was formerly, and today it is again, Zojoji Temple, which was an important ancestral temple, Buddhist temple of the shogunate I should say of the shogun and his family for over 2 centuries before it was reappropriated for this Shinto mission. So they had to find people to share this message, right? And there were not enough well-educated Shinto priests to travel around and spread this new gospel. So they brought several to Tokyo, but they also tried to find people who were perhaps better at the job but not as qualified, including Buddhist priests, but also healers from new religions, like I mentioned last class, kabuki actors, and also school teachers. They were all brought to train in how to promote basically this new merging of Shinto, or the religion of the kami, with nationalism throughout Japan. I've already said that. It was very hard to figure out beyond these three things what to say, so they had to end up making guidebooks that were a bit more clear and in a sort of important script to not deviate from when you were doing these preaching. And it was largely a failure in the sense of people didn't become Shinto adherents overnight. But it was successful in that it spreads a new awareness of Shinto as Japan's official religion. And this is what I want to make sure that we go away with today, is that people realize this, in fact. So it is not entirely a success either in terms of administration. The Department of Divinity goes through some bureaucratic changes. There was some fighting between priests and officials over which of the two major branches of this new Shinto hierarchy was more important. So there was politics, like in today's U.S. Senate and Congress or whatever. There was a lot of fighting that weakened the message, right? But so the end result is that the government then in 1884, there's a bit of an about face, and it decides that the most interesting way the most useful way to approach Shinto is to make it be above religion. In other words, not to try and preach Shinto beliefs, all the different kami, all these things, but to make it about core beliefs that relate to Japan and Japan's origins and the emperor. And those are the most important elements that everyone in Japan should believe, and these are in fact above religion, or it becomes a non-religion in fact. And that Shinto should be used also to spread messages of loyalty and obedience to the emperor above any sort of religious differences that might exist. This requires also the emperor to have a new position in the Japanese eye. If you'll recall, I talked last class about the emperor who was a no one for people in Japan. They never heard of him before. He didn't have any actual power, if you'll recall, during the period of the shogunate. So it was a process to make him something else. And a part of that process was making him important within Shinto. So he becomes the high priest of all of Shinto with new measures towards the end of the Great Teaching Campaign. He would also visit shrines in person, but especially military shrines like Yasukuni and Ise, his ancestral shrine. The government would make sure that newspapers in Japan would publicize rites being performed in the palace by the emperor throughout Japan, and then people would also be encouraged to take part in the same rite at home at the same time to sort of promote their proximity and identification with the emperor as well. The emperor was also, he toured all over Japan, and this was actually one of his major jobs, was to tour around, and people would then begin to see him for an important figure in the country and to recognize his importance through these efforts. I mean, a very massive PR campaign. And another important element was the promotion of the imperial couple's wedding anniversary, which was celebrated every year, but especially celebrated at the 5 and 10 year marks and 15 and 20 year marks as well, that were national celebrations of the imperial couple. And this was very successful. As we'll talk about later, the Meiji Emperor, who died in 1912, he'd been in charge of Japan as emperor from 1868 to 1912, so for a very long time. And in that time, he'd gone from being someone that no one in Japan recognized or knew, had ever seen before, besides people of the court and those who were high-ranking in the shogunate, to being the most visible, important person in Japan, the most identifiable face in Japan. And his funeral was a major national event that brought the country together. And also, they were actually also very sad. It was a very sad time for Japan. We'll maybe have more time to talk about people who did things like commit suicide out of sadness for his passing. So this was overall a success. This effort to bring people towards Shinto, but also to bring the emperor into public view. Let's talk lastly about an effort that ties these pieces together. The Shinto prominence piece, the anti-Christian piece, the imperial importance piece, the fear of too much popular sort of political participation, and the need for more nationalism and patriotism. A professor at the Imperial University named Inoue Tetsujiro, who was very much anti-Christian, became an imperial advisor, advising the emperor, but also some of his ministers in the late 1880s. He was very much opposed to Christianity. He was very much in favor of religion serving the state. So in fact, kind of bringing back these Confucian ideas that were important back in the Edo period, in fact. He's the person who writes an educational rescript, commentary, but he also provides the text for this document. And this is, I'm going to move on next to this next part here. So what he really wanted was to sort of to actualize these ideals that were so important and that could tie together the government and nationalism and being patriotic with Shinto and with the importance of the emperor. And if we go back a little bit, we could think about, for example, the importance the emperor had in the ideas of Motoori Norinaga and that group, and how they now have become part of the national government's stance on monarchy. In 1890, the text he helps to write is promulgated and is called the Imperial Restriction on Education. And this is a document that, as you mentioned, Roshila, is very important because it's going to be read in schools, all schools throughout Japan. Now there are schools everywhere. It's a very important document that has, it's sacred and because it has the imperial stamps on it. And it sort of contains the essential morality that the government is now trying to spread in Japan. It was so important that this, along with the imperial portrait of Emperor Meiji and the Meiji Empress, were rescued from burning schools at risk of great peril to make sure that they didn't burn and were not harmed. So, thinking about your seventh grader, this text, which was read oftentimes, if possible, in sight while looking at, which was recited from memory while looking at the imperial portrait, was a really important part of ritual in the school in Meiji Japan. So I want you guys now to take out your phones or your computers, whatever you have that has internet, and go to our class's page for Moodle. There's a document called Imperial Research on Education. I'd like to ask you to click on it and open that, please. So when you have it, look up so I can see that you're there. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to ask you all now to stand up. And if you can keep your screen in view, that's good. And we're going to read this text together. Let's take a second, and we're going to act as if I'm your teacher, but in Meiji Japan, and you are all, let's say you're in 7th grade, and we're going to read this text together. And no mistakes. It's very important. If you make mistakes, then I, as teacher, can be fired, or I can be forced to atone for not doing a good job. So let's be serious here. Okay? All right. Know ye, our ancestors, our imperial ancestors, have founded our empire on a basis broad and everlasting, and have deeply and firmly implanted virtue. Our subjects, ever united in loyalty and filial piety, have from generation to generation illustrated the beauty thereof. This is the glory of the fundamental character of our empire, and herein also lies the source of our education. Ye, our subjects, be filial to your parents, affectionate to your brothers and sisters. As husbands and wives, be harmonious. As friends, true. Bear yourselves in modesty and moderation. Extend your benevolence to all. Pursue learning and cultivate arts, and thereby develop intellectual faculties and perfect moral powers. Furthermore, advance public good and promote common interests. Always respect the Constitution and observe the laws. Should emergency arise, offer yourselves courageously to the state, and thus guard and maintain the prosperity of our imperial throne, coeval with heaven and earth. So shall ye not only be our good and faithful subjects, but render illustrious the best traditions of your forefathers. The way here is set forth indeed by our imperial ancestors, to be observed alike by the descendants and the subjects, infallible for all ages and true in all places. It is our wish to lay it to heart in all reverence, in common with you, our subjects, that we may thus attain to the same virtue. All right, thank you all for that. Okay, so as we're about to wrap up here, I